preservation of the human race. And this is the year 2023. And I tell you, I'm literally appalled at what I'm hearing, because I don't see where we really are asking. We're kind of just planting our feet 10 toes in based on what we were told, what we believe. We should be open to, it's okay to change our mind based on new information, especially if that information can be substantiated. And I was trying to say in a room yesterday about the letter J. Somebody, well, what does that matter that the letter J didn't exist? Well, what does it matter that Jesus wasn't white? Well, what it matters is because this whole religious system has been prepackaged for our consumption, and we just eating it up. And if the Bible says there is only one name under heaven and earth whereby men must be saved, what is it? Is it Jesus? Is it Jesus? Don't tell me about translation, because you can translate the Bible into different languages so that everyone can understand the word. I get that. And we know there's going to be a few inconsistencies. But when you transliterate, now you're changing the meaning of the name. So we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about witchcraft, we're talking about the English language that has everything pretty much messed up and being left open to someone's interpretation. And I can just interpret that you're a witch because you're not a Christian.
Faith, if I may, and I'm going to give you more time. I'm going to give you more time to speak if you'd like. My specific challenge to the stage was that is there anyone that is on stage that either participates in witchcraft, practices witchcraft, is sympathetic to it, on and on, all the different, however you can frame it. Is there anyone that is on stage that fits that title that would be willing to acknowledge, hang on, that is willing to acknowledge that I just pointed out the stats of how many thousands and thousands of Christians get killed, how many thousands and thousands get kidnapped, and how many thousands and thousands get imprisoned for the sole crime of Christianity? Is there anyone that feels passionately about witchcraft that would be willing to defend Christians?
Yeah, so that's what I was hoping to speak to, Stephen. So this is Kelly. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and I am sympathetic to people who, like, firstly, I don't know how a witch is defined. I think different people have different definitions, and certainly
that's why I was trying to be all-encompassing. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. So I would definitely say that I'm sympathetic to people who quote unquote are witches or practice witchcraft. I think that there's all different types of interpretations of that, and I think that I see people talking a lot these days about demonic types of practices, which I'm not sympathetic to. But Stephen, regarding the sympathy that I have, I actually am sponsoring a Syrian refugee from, he's in Lebanon now. He's been hiding, he's been held, being kept safe in Lebanon in a church. He's got refuge there, but he was persecuted in Syria for being a Christian, and so he's going to come to Canada. Myself and 4 other people are his sponsors. I have a cinematographer from Egypt who has told me really horrific things about being persecuted in Egypt as a Christian. So I definitely am sympathetic to people who are Christian, as well as I would be for women who might be being attacked for engaging in what some people might consider witchcraft, or like Indigenous people who are practicing their connection to what their understanding is, like through the great law of peace, which they were given the same way that Jesus was the prophet for Christians. Personally, I was brought up Roman Catholic. I do not subscribe to that at all, although I love what I learned about Jesus in the Bible and would consider myself a Christian, but I will never follow any organized religion again for the same reasons that Fifth Dimension just spoke about. I think that the Bible has been used as an instrument and a measure of an instrument for oppression and control, and for getting people to follow along obediently to something that has been changed and sort of manipulated for that control. I've certainly been a victim of institutional abuse through the Catholic Church, and I've recovered from that. I left the Catholic Church because where I come from, the Mount Cashel scandal was the first one to break in the 80s of priests that were assaulting mostly boys, but it was the first of many cases around the world of priests assaulting children and being moved around by the Vatican. So my experience with religion has been really awful, and then I could never reconcile from the upbringing that I had. My father told me that when he went to church, and the priests were like better than God in where we came from. I'm from an island in Canada. It's a very big island that's not very well populated. So they got away with a lot of things, and they would actually be delivering their sermons facing the back of the church and not looking at the congregation and speaking to them in Latin. So they had no idea what the priests were saying. And there was a lot of weird stuff going on with the church, and they were in collusion with the priests. They were putting Indigenous people in camps and taking their kids away from them. So I have a lot of feelings about what people in those types of positions did in the Crusades, what they did to the witches, what they did to Indigenous people and people who were practicing, I would say, more natural practices of communing with the earth, which, and there's been some stamping out through the use of the Bible of being connected to the earth and anything that's connected to the feminine. And I think that's, a big part of the problem that we face in society today is not being connected to the earth and not being connected to the feminine aspects of ourselves, and not being protective over women and children. But yet people claim to be Christians and would actually want to go hunting witches, which could put women in jeopardy. I have a lot of issues with many of those things, but I do sponsor one Christian that's coming from Syria, and I have a cinematographer that I've helped who also was persecuted. So I would never want to hunt or to have persecution of any person for their practices. I take issue with people making sweeping statements about witchcraft and witchery. It's been used to literally kill thousands, not just hundreds, thousands of mostly women around the world. That's facts. And it's a very dangerous, it sets off so many alarm bells from people talking about being concerned about witchcraft. Be concerned about the demonic things in Hollywood and in the celebrity culture and all of the mostly male-led cults that have been happening through history, including inside of the church. Be very concerned. Don't fucking worry about the witches.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
She ate that up like that fit in. Ooh, sorry.
You're right.
Yawn.
I find it very interesting because, I never thought about, I don't think much on how witches are identified, particularly through Christians or through religious groups. However, I do take notice that witches themselves would define themselves by even people who plant herbs and certain kind of like gardening skills, and they say they're a witch because they're a horticulturist. So I think the word by itself has a very loose definition, and I agree with you. Like there are good and bad identifying witches, essentially. But I particularly wanted to respond to what was said earlier by Fifth. I agree with a lot of what you were saying as well about how a Latinized version of the original text and the books is sort of a confusion. sort of going out the back of what Zach said about blacks leaving the church and whatnot, because it's sort of a separation from what we understand to be the origination, of the language. Like for example, myself, I carry an Aramaic text Bible, which is the language in which Jesus spoke. So that, instead of having 15 translations in between, it's directly from the Aramaic language to English. So, so I find my own ways of trying to sort of circumvent that. However, one thing that you did make was an association between conquest and pillaging by Christian groups. You definitely did state the fact that it's particularly political. That's true. However, I think that, at least for myself, I view the Catholic Church as an extension of the Roman Empire, with the Pope and whatnot, which is essentially the same group that made the order of the death of Christ. So, the Catholic Church as an organization is the one that's sort of associated with pillaging, and let's also take note that they are a false representation of Christ. I think many people would agree with that. The Pope.
Wait. This is Steve, man. So
I was done anyway.
I don't mind. Yeah. Well, first off, I don't mind criticisms of individual Catholic churches. I don't mind criticisms of parts of Catholic history, individual Catholics, priests, decisions. Any person who lives on earth is going to fall short of the glory. But to say that
as an institution,
at a minimum, estimates actually say it's a majority of Christians, but to say at least half of the Christian denomination of this world, which are Catholics, are in a false institution and falsely practicing Christianity is the kind of Catholic hate that every Catholic just gets disgusted and frustrated with having to hear their entire lives.
No, that's fair.
The Catholic hate that's on this app is just unbelievable. And I'm not saying that you hold it. No. The Catholic hate is much more than witch hate on this app. And it's not even close. It's probably 10 to 1. I rarely hear about witches unless Prashant and Fury are hosting a room, and then everyone comes in and complains about it. I hear a negative comment about Catholicism every single day on this app, and that's a fact.
There's still huge
So
issues.
I'm not going to write off millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people who feel like they feel like they are fed in their faith to go to mass, that somehow they're
please don't make it, because I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I understand that.
Yeah,
Don't do that. However, I have to clarify that I take note of the institution in of itself. Practicing Catholics, I don't want to put any kind of practitioner of Catholicism in what I'm saying. But I'm saying as an institution, what was being referenced about the conquest and the pillaging of people and groups, that was by the Catholic order. You see, for example, I'm not going to associate.
I'm sorry. I agree with you.
Can I please finish my statement though? Just let me just.
Sure.
Thank you. I don't want to associate, for example, the children who were found in Canada in the schools and the mass graves, something that the Catholic people who go to mass on Sunday, something that distributes them. However, the institution is something that I would take aim at as to why something like that would happen. So I don't want to make any kind of ties or association between practitioners and the institution, because I try to make that distinction. So I apologize if I
And this is the last thing I have to say, and I promise you won't hear from me. I'm going to continue to listen. It's been great dialogue. For me, having been Springle Methodist, Baptist Baptist, Catholic, went to Catholic schools, different schools, ordained non-denominational, all of that. God still wanted me a Christian, but not just going to church, being about it, studying it, to show myself approved. when I look at Christ, the one he's the example, right? There isn't anywhere in this Bible where he tells us to slap his name on a building and worship him. It was his life. He was the example. He even died. I mean, if you look at the way he died and what he did, the miracles he performed, raising people from the dead, turning water to wine, even whether it's allegorical, fake or not, I'm talking to the people who don't believe he really existed, and these are just stories and allegories. Even if it is a story, even if it truly happened, the moral of the story, he either was hung on a tree or he was crucified. But even the works that he did were attributed to the devil. And if you have the same spirit that he had and you're doing the works that he do, he said, greater works shall you do than these. He was a revolutionary and he was coming against the established order of that day. And when I step back and I look and I see what's happening, I just see it happening all over again. You know, that's what I see. He died the death of a witch or a warlock. He was killed because who he said he came in the name of and what he came to do. And who he was.
Death of a warlock.
So that's what I'm talking about.
So let me, Fitz, can I ask you, no, Fitz, let me ask you a question. Hang on. So you have all this experience with a lot of Christian denominations. You listed them all out. So I would imagine that you've picked up a thing or two over your time. And I actually mean that sincerely. My question to you is, when you, and I hear this often from people who are, and I'll just use the term sympathetic to witchcraft, okay? Because you can never figure out what the exact word is. Just please accept.
No, I would not.
Fifth. Okay, this isn't telling a kid to eat their broccoli. Okay, please don't keep saying no. For the love of God, woman, will you just let me finish my point? I'm actually complimenting you. Please learn to take a compliment. I was actually pointing at it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Some people never do figure that out.
Love you guys.
I was telling you that you've picked up some information over your time. So would you mind sharing with us any sort of verse that you have in your repertoire that you point to, that you can say, hey, this is what I'm referring to when I say that Jesus is, quote unquote, being seen as a witch, or he died in the name of being a witch, or something to that effect. Do you have
Stephen, you're so stupid.
Okay, that's what I'd like to hear.
Question.
Yes.
It's a terrible question. Get your genders correct, Stephen, you schmuck.
Well, you can ask me that, but you stated it by saying I'm sympathetic to witchcraft.
Because there's 100 different words, just like there's people trying to say there's 100 different genders. I'm just trying to get to the question. I really don't care what the title.
Okay. Anyway, they said that the work that you do are attributed to Beelzebub. That's what the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and if you want me to go pull it out for you and Google it, I can pull it up and tell you chapter and verse. But
would you mind actually?
I will do that. I absolutely will. And when I come back, I'll tell you what it is. But right now, just off the top of my head, they accused him. They attributed. Okay, they attributed to the works that he did to Beelzebub, and basically, Cobb was saying he was Satan's son. So is that what you wanted to know?
Right.
Okay.
Is that house that divided against itself should not stand?
That's not the one I'm talking about.
Okay. If we could have somebody send me a message of what that verse is, either Fit or someone else, if they know what she's referring to. Thanks.
It might have been one of the Pharisees making a claim against him. Basically, they thought he was a heretic, which was what they're
right. And he said if your feet was of Beelzebub, why would Beelzebub cast out Beelzebub? That was the house divided against itself will not stand.
The house divided against itself will not stand.
Christianity, if it's a real thing or whatever, which is what I hear. I've heard a lot of heresy on the stage. I've heard a lot of objective, I don't know, what people think are facts. But the order of the day is witchcraft. and there's a rise in witchcraft. And so the one question that
witchcraft is rising.
Act like people were getting hunted down by the masses or something, like there's a bunch of witch hunters running around burning bitches. That's not happening. What is happening, though, is a rise of people who are falling away from the church and practicing actual witchcraft. Actual witchcraft involves people who think they're spirit healers, certain forms of freaking yoga, tarot card reading, astrology, all of these things that you practice thinking that the source of that power comes somewhere else than God. That is what witchcraft is. Because that power does come from somewhere. It's not from God, it's from the devil, which is why it's listed as witchcraft. It's had many forms over the years. There's lots of stories in the Bible about it. And we're here today to bring awareness that it's on the rise. If any of you have TikTok, go ahead and just search up hashtag witch talk. And you'll see tons of young individuals starting to play around with shit like blood sacrifices and blood magic. And it's kind of fun, and it's a cool game. I saw someone mention, Harry Potter and shit in the chat. That's not too far off from, it's sort of like a gateway into thinking that this sort of stuff is okay. But it's definitely not okay in the eyes of God. And this book that we have pinned above, for example, was based in trying to not persecute people who were not, they weren't out to just accuse anyone, right? They were actually very thorough about not accusing the wrong people. It's a very thorough process, and it was. And there's been
I'm blocked from this room on other accounts, FYI.
I've heard people say, there's thousands.
I would love to debate
thousands.
this guy, but
just looked up
it's
the
never
stat.
going to happen.
There was 20 deaths during the Salem witch trials, one of the most horrific events, people argue, where, quote unquote, innocent women were killed. But the reality is I ask you, how many abortions kill people a year? I'd argue that that's a form of witchcraft, to be honest with you. So start looking at those numbers. But the reality is, y'all need Jesus.
This is a new church. They actually recently opened up abortion services at one of their clinics. And it's actually required that you perform a satanic ritual before getting an abortion. But I agree with
I want to add something, because in Romans chapter 1, verse 21, it says, because that when they knew God, they glorified not God, not as God. Neither were they thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and they tried to change the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible men, into birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor themselves, even their bodies between themselves. Even the men went against nature. So this is the very cause, I wanted to add, that this is the cause that God gave them up to foul affections. And he turned them over to a reprobate mind, because they tried to use the rudiments of the world. And this is what it says in Colossians 2. Beware lest any man spoil you the philosophy and vain deceit and traditions of men after the rudiments of the world. This is, again, where it's associated in 1 Corinthians, and I land right here. 1 Corinthians 1, verse 21. And it says this: where is the wise? This is verse 20. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Have not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them. So God, again, he chose the foolish things of the world to confound the wise and people who think that they're wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound things which are mighty. So these things must be understood, that when you're messing with the rudiments of the world and the traditions of men, this is what you always fall into, is witchcraft and Satanism.
But it's more, in my view, it's more political violence. Like, people think, like, there are people who do have that state of mind where it's like, we'll go to civil war if we have to. there might be no other choice. And, I hear the same kind of phrasing from people in Antifa, and some others.
Let me tell you this. You don't have to worry about a civil war in this country. We are far too fucking fat to fight anything. It's just not going to happen. The left is too fat. The right is too fat.
There might be a civil war.
But if we want to
Never say never.
Yeah, if we want to start getting along, though, I think what we should start putting forward, and we talked about this in this room before, is we need to put ideas ahead of identity. And I think when people are leading on either side with identity, we end up with some really bad results. And so what we should do is identify, the individual rights that we want to protect, and then forget about identity. Just literally, go full on into the idea that these individual rights should be protected, and that any institution, whether it's social media, these tech companies, whether it's state government, federal government, anyone that stands in the way of infringing on individual rights, whether it's coming from the left or the right, they are the ones that are at fault. And we could do this a lot more cleanly if we just get identity out of the picture.
I completely agree with you, but the sad part is that people are not willing. They cling to their identity so much, whether it is that woke, whatever identity, quote unquote, or it is that conservative identity. Unfortunately, people have divided themselves into tribes in such extreme ways, and they're unable to let go. And to that extent, I've been accused, I've never gotten as much hate as I've gotten lately. And it's because it's weird. The position that I've taken in these forums that I speak in is really, I'm not this extreme liberal or leftist or something like that. I take a pretty reasonable, open-minded position most of the time, but people hate anything that's first of all, that's called a fence sitter, or anything that doesn't give me the strong identity. And the other thing that they don't like is this the sense of so people have accused me, and a lot of people really don't like that so the thing that they said recently was that I make them question. They make people who know the truth. Question themselves.
Oh no!
And it's such a cost division, and it make the problem worse. Yeah, which is well, if I make you question, that means that you're not so sure of the truth, right? What else would it make you so upset? But they hate that, and that whoever made that comment got so many likes, and I'm thinking, wow. And so that irritates people a lot. I just never imagined that would trigger people in the way.
So that's the mirror of the woke criticism of you're gaslighting. You're gaslighting us. You're gaslighting me. Do they use the word gaslighting, or is that still just?
They haven't used the word gaslighting, but that's essentially. I think that's what they mean, right? I think that's what they mean. And all I do is they ask questions, right? That's all I do. I often don't even make statements of my own.
You're not even meaning to push past their boundaries.
No.
You're not meaning to do that. It's just happening naturally, organically, because you're making them question their own identity. And that's what's important right now, is this identity that everybody's been conditioned into beholding within themselves. Yeah, categorization is different from judgment. Judgment and categorization are different. And people keep thinking that you're judging someone when you're only categorizing based on survival mechanisms. It's a completely different thing. You don't need to judge another human being's experience.
I'm not even sure Catherine would be categorizing people, but I wanted to ask you one other related question, Catherine, which is when you get deranged, as somebody who's received deranged threats and just weird shit from the worst of the woke, how does that differ from now that you've got deranged messages from the worst of the right? Or is it all analogous, or I'm interested in that on the level of ideas and also the language that they use. How are they similar?
Weirdly enough, the worst stuff has come from the right. It's more deranged, more vulgar from the right. Usually less educated. So I would say the attacks are different.
That's educated.
I would say the attacks from the right are far more vulgar and just dumber.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the woke lunatics have PhDs. That is.
Yeah, exactly. I think the difference, though, is again, I think it's in terms of power. The left has more of a threat to it, like more of a bite, like they can actually cause real world harm, whereas the others can't really do much. So these threats are more like, disgusting, and continue for a while. But so they're kind of powerless. But the other ones are more mild in a way, but have more teeth behind them.
Wow. Yeah, it's all very interesting to hear because you very rarely have somebody who gets it from both sides.
Right? Like, I made it my post. No, I never thought that would be the case. It's like, it is interesting. Like, intellectually, it's weird. Like, I think I'm a little more resilient than I would have been in the past, but I think how much you get does sometimes get to you. Like, it's a little bit, like, I don't get as much from the woke anymore. I think they don't follow, like, I used to worry about, I think I started a podcast series recently, and my first episode, I was the most terrified to talk about anything to do with trans people. That was like the scariest topic for me. And even though I have pretty mild thoughts on that, but I interviewed someone who I think they really hate, and so I was worried. But then you realize, like, no woke person really sits through an hour plus podcast on the topic.
That they don't want to learn.
Where do the conservative lunatics? Where are they congregating? Are they in the comment section of like Dave Rubin's locals page, or like where is the circle jerk happening?
I mean, I don't know if it's Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is like a little more mild, I think, in general, but I think it's happening more on Twitter. I mean, Twitter Spaces definitely leans more, for whatever reason, definitely leans more conservative. When I came into that big Twitter space that you're talking about, so it's called Roundtable. The guy, well, okay, I won't out his affiliation because he keeps it under wraps. The main host, Mario, but I was like, it felt like an extremely conservative space, and I was like, man, this is a little much, and so we've tried to balance it a lot more. So part of why I was involved was because I was one of the people to try and balance it as being the token liberal. And then I always say, like, hey, we don't have enough liberals on stage. We need to balance it. And then occasionally we had this really funny moment when I realized, hey, we don't have enough conservatives on stage, and we had to bring in more conservatives. So that was kind of great.
And all the while, nobody's bothered pointing out that it's a total fucking sausage fest.
People do point that out a lot of women too, yeah.
Catherine, are you getting threats? Are you getting direct, real threats?
So the threats, like, I don't consider them like real viable threats. Yeah, like, people do say things like die and things like that. I wouldn't consider them, like, it's not like somebody goes like, I know where you live and I'm gonna show up there. So I personally wouldn't count them as like death threats the way that some journalists do.
That is a very funny distinction between conservative lunatics and woke lunatics, is that the woke lunatics don't use the wrong your or their.
Yeah, and I think somebody said that I lost my mind when Hillary lost the election. That was one of the attacks I got. Plus a lot of swear words, and I think I occasionally post the attacks, and I call it fan man.
Yeah, you should, and I hope you don't take any of it personally. It doesn't sound like you do. And is anybody on the Truth or True app?
I haven't been on that. I did sign up for getter when it first came around, just to see. I didn't realize it was as conservative as it is. Like, they literally send like Trump endorsement letters. So, but yeah, I mean, I think even conservatives, they don't like being in these echo chambers, right? They want. I mean, this is the great thing about Twitter, is that it does allow people to be together. And some of the people obviously want to be an echo chamber, but a lot of people enjoy the interaction and the back and forth. Like, I have a lot of conservatives that follow me, and they say, I disagree with you like a lot, but I appreciate being able to hear a different point of view and the pushback, and you're reasonable, right? And fair and balanced. And like, I sound like a Fox slogan now, but like, I respect that so much, because that takes a certain kind of person to have that mindset. And unfortunately, like, there's a lot of people who do not have that mindset. And but I think the healthiest thing we can do is like just shove us all together, and have these conversations, and ideally don't even identify whether you're liberal or conservative. Just talk to each other like human beings, and disagree on some things and agree on others. Like, ideally, don't, like what El Presidente, Mr. Roger said. Just be human. Like, don't use the identity. This is what's really driving, I think, the wedge, is like everyone feels like they have to identify. Like, look at people's bios. Like, people, especially on Twitter, constantly put their political affiliation. Like, I don't know anything about people besides who they vote for. Like, why is that the first thing I'm learning about a person? Like, I want to know if you like dogs, do you like Broadway whatever. I just, like, why are people putting their political orientation? It's like putting your sexual orientation in. Like, that's like, also, why do I need to know that? You're a person.
Oh my God, I love you.
Thank you. Did I kill the room?
No, but I mean, there are many information shortcuts through which you can pretty immediately tell. I mean, when somebody, the latest ivermectin study really does reveal some very interesting points. Right? I mean, that lunatic woman, that doctor, is she Nigerian? She is hawking her ivermectin snake oil. I mean, she's not gonna fuck. Her new hobby's not gonna be in a fucking Biden, 2020 t-shirt, right?
Yeah, but I'm for example, I'm very anti-mandates for the vaccine, but that doesn't make me a conservative, right? Like, and some people are going to assume that I am, even if I posted something like that, right? Probably.
Well, notice that's why I chose ivermectin and not mandates for my information shortcut for the worst kind of conservative.
Brett Weinstein, is the ivermectin king, and he's not a conservative.
He's like the one sort of liberal. But I mean, that became a conservative issue for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Why didn't that even?
I just want to correct you and say she wasn't Nigerian. She's from Cameroon.
Oh, don't let those details get in the way.
I stand corrected. I shall self-flagellate off my.
Oh my God! You said you were standing corrected.
Well, he'll self.
I really don't understand. Ned, I don't understand how something about ivermectin is a medical issue. How did it become politicized? How is it something that someone on the right or left?
That's a whole nother
medical issue.
It's turning into a vax room.
No, it won't. But he's correct. Why is that a political issue? Right. Or it shouldn't be a political issue.
Just like hating on Elon Musk shouldn't be a lefty thing. But it has become a lefty thing for whatever reason. Things just take on a life of their own for whatever dumb reason.
Could it be because he says things like vote Republican? Does that fuel?
Yeah, that does. Yeah,
that does. Is it just irrational for people on the other side of the spectrum to respond with fury after the guy who buys social media apps says vote Republican? Or is that just irrational that they would be against that?
You make a reasonable point, as usual, but also he has also said, I have voted Democrat my entire life, and yet the left has only recently gotten so fucking insane.
And yet we have no proof of that. Just like we have no proof that he actually voted for Republican in the last election.
Well, I'd like to interject for a second. He went for 2 years where the President of the United States would not speak his name, all right? He employs 120,000 people. He has created a lot of wealth outside of his own wealth. And so the left has fucked him for 2 years. There's been Tesla Q every day in the press since the day he bought Twitter. So, you know, he reacted to that.
Yes, and by the way, even Kara Swisher, who's super, I like her, but she's super woke. She search YouTube Pete Buttigieg, Kara Swisher. Excellent interview. They both acquit themselves very well. She pushes Buttigieg in this. She's like, you guys, the Biden administration has been fucking weird. Prior to the Twitter stuff where Elon started acting like a douche, like, why did you guys clearly made a concerted effort, like, to never mention this guy?
Because they're owned by the unions,
at the same time, you're like running around like these new like Chrysler like EV factories that wouldn't exist if it weren't for Elon Musk's impact on that whole part of the automotive and energy, industries. And Buttigieg handled it well because he's a very he's just watched the whole thing. But even Kara Swisher's like, you're really being weird about this anti-Elon stuff. I think maybe you should think that maybe you do have an issue with being anti-Elon.
I think maybe it's a good idea.
I think he takes a political stance, and this is a person. I was referring to, vaccines and ivermectin and, vaccination policies and mandates and things of government policies. These are technical matters that shouldn't be politicized. And I think there's a very big difference there.
But our
maybe it's a good
president
idea.
Politicized the entire COVID process.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe
this is a matter for science, not politics.
Yeah, well, I don't know what world people are living in. Maybe it's a good idea for the head of the American government and his and eventually her administration to not talk about private industry at all. And there should be some separation between that, because when presidents talk about things, they manipulate markets, and the manipulation of markets has profound impacts on things like people's 401ks, their retirements, their pension plans. So maybe it's actually a good model to not single out individual CEOs generally.
I agree with you, except that, but hold on. At the same time that he's ignored Musk, Biden's been getting a diaper change at the latest Ford.
I'm just going to go ahead and finish my point. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and finish. Or maybe we live in a world where politics are politicized, and so presidents from the very beginning of the United States have had favorites and non-favorites. And the only reason why this is a big deal is because there are fanboys of a particular one that this particular president and his administration, because of a policy issue, doesn't like. I don't know. Maybe if Americans realized that politics happened before 2016, they would see that there's a long history of presidents singling out some companies and not others. But what do I know?
No, we're not ready for that conversation.
I apologize for talking about American politics. I shouldn't trigger people on social media.
I don't understand the point you're making. Because presidents have played favorites for political reasons that just somehow justifies Biden.
No, I ain't
totally
justified.
ignoring.
Okay, so I'll say it again for you slowly because you were interrupting me last time. I get 2 points. Maybe it's a good idea for presidents not to single out companies they like or not like, because then they'll say things like, we're bringing jobs back, and they don't bring them back. Or they're going to have a bunch of bonuses. They can make a lot of money. They get little bonuses, and then the wages go down, and they get fired. Or maybe presidents have always played favorites, and that's just how the game goes. The point I was making was, perhaps in this instance, because particular people like this particular person, i.e. Elon Musk, they're up in arms about it. Look, let's not get it twisted. The federal government is still sending billions and billions of dollars to Tesla, SpaceX, etc. Whether Brandon mentions him or not doesn't matter. He's getting his government money. That's all that matters for him.
Well, all it's going to do is that Pete Buttigieg capitulated to Kara Swisher, very woke Kara Swisher's challenge, who she agrees with me, not with you. I usually sympathize with your point of view. And he even said that he would give Elon Musk a hug the next time he sees him. So,
thank you. So that's great that Kara Swisher, who every time you mention her, you say she's woke, which is ironic because you were just lamenting the fact that on Twitter, people put their political affiliations and interests. But every time you mention someone's name, you mention their political interests and affiliations. So the fact that
I was not the one to mention that, actually.
Gadget, you did. Yes, she mentioned it, and you
Catherine and I
responded to it.
are different. She's a man.
Yeah. That's fine. So, okay, Catherine agrees with you. Fantastic. I'll send you a butter crunch cookie. My point is the subsidies still flow to Tesla. The grants are still flowing to Tesla. Tesla complained about the EV tax credits. Certain cars have now been included, and in the future, other cars will be included. Wow, it's American politics. It's as if no one's ever read anything that happened before 2016. But I'll mute up because I don't want to trigger people by knowing what I'm talking about. I apologize.
It's okay, man. We all sometimes make false attributions about who said what, but it's okay. You have a high batting average, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, when Catherine said it, you agreed with
tried to play it cool, but you did fuck it up.
No.
And everybody knows. It's okay.
Is there like a laughing emoji that I can do in here?
Yes, there is. Yeah, long press on your profile.
Okay.
Or you can simply just mic and hit them with ha 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 ha.
I just got back in. Ned's talking a lot about a lot of people that aren't in his field. Did anyone ask him for his resume to have an opinion, or does that rule no longer stand?
Good old appeal to authority. Got anything better than that, Go? You can do better than that.
Well, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about something that happened in the room before you got in there. So appeal to the mute button because you don't know what I'm talking about. God bless.
No, the commandments changed immediately after you left the room. So we're up in a different set of rules now.
I see.
Is there a shade emoji?
I wish.
You know, there are gifts. Catherine, there are gifts.
Needs to be a smack my head emoji.
I wish there was a drop mic emoji. We all need to have a petition about the fire sound. It's not conducive to the sound fire should make. It's very, very.
You mean the fire alarm?
Yeah, the fire. Like here's what it sounds like, right? To remind everybody.
You obviously don't know where the sound is from.
What is that?
Now that you've mentioned it, I'm seriously considering this. Moving forward, if I am to run a room or anything like that, on any topic, I like to talk politics, so I'm not an expert in anything else. I will most likely have this rule. If you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, stay in the audience. Roger, are you down for something like that?
Yeah, it would have to clear off half the stage though, in almost every.
Then Roger, why complain about people say? I mean, that's what we do on Clubhouse.
Well, hold on, Mamadou. I'm gonna make this point very clear. Because I probably got more back channels from this room than any room I've done in like 6 months. It's that when somebody's making an asinine claim. That somebody that is one of the most successful businessmen in the history of the world don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. When they call somebody a dipshit,
bro,
I think it's proper. I think it's proper that they get drugged by the entire audience, especially when John Legere shows up and says, "No, of course he's not a dipshit. He's one of the smartest men in the world." And then every person that we asked that entered the room said, of course he's not a dipshit. And then when given an opportunity to walk back his comment about being a dipshit, he refused to do it. So I have no sympathy for a person that gets drugged with their own stupid comment.
Imagine being committed to liberty and free speech and a person making an opinion.
Are you under the impression that free speech applies in a clubhouse room? Is that,
No,
is
I'm
that,
not under that impression at all.
okay, because maybe we should review the First Amendment, because it sounds like you're a little confused about it.
No, I'm not. I'm just talking
Okay,
about
then why don't we talk about the First Amendment? Tie it back to
because
this
I didn't mention
conversation,
the First Amendment.
Okay.
I didn't mention the First
Oh,
Amendment.
you said free speech. And that's what we get our
free speech is not just in the First Amendment.
Oh, okay. Got it. Which amendment is it?
I wasn't talking about free speech as it's codified under American law. I was talking about this principle of airing ideas.
Got it.
Like in an anti-woke way.
Got it.
But if you'd like to talk about the history of free speech in English common law, please have the room because I can speak circles around that. Circles around you on that as well. So
yeah, obviously you want to change the subject now about
no,
free
I don't.
speech. Then go ahead. Continue.
So thank you. So it's fascinating that at the top of the room it says the dipshit is a despised person. Well, Jesse has a particular understanding of dipshit. Why would he have to retract what he thinks because of what John Legere says? Perhaps Jesse's a dipshit, and we should have just dragged Jesse. Why would we need to appeal to somebody else? Jesse's annoying. That was the wildest hour of all time.
No, it was
Why didn't we
3
just
hours.
drag Jesse?
Great, it was 3 hours. It was 3 hours. It could have ended in 5 minutes if he just said, yeah, maybe I overstated my case. But instead of doing that, in true Jesse fashion, he decided to double down and triple down.
Why was Legere right for saying
Who cares?
Is a bad, or not a good CEO? Did that make sense to anyone?
The oversharing. Every CEO understood that the oversharing is a detriment to leadership in some degree, and that's what Legere's basis was.
Bro, that's something you would learn in business school, goddammit. I mean, if you're running a public company in America, there are certain things that you don't want to talk about.
It didn't make sense because he was the CEO of 2 other companies.
Well,
he was the CEO of Twitter for how long? And it didn't make sense to me.
We got an insight into him on Twitter before he owned it, and that he was cute and he was everyone's darling. Okay, but he was still oversharing a lot. I mean, look at the 420 tweet. He almost lost a shit ton of money.
I'm just going to say something real quick. Hold up. This is important. I think it's kind of ableist to act like some people are able to keep their mouth shut about their companies.
What?
Roger, it's Laura. Can I jump in here about John Legere? Just an FYI, John Legere asked Elon Musk for a job at Twitter and got shot down.
Yes. Everybody read that tweet, Laura. That's not news.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know if everybody in the room knew, but yeah, just because John Legere is a wackadoo.
Wait, why would John Legere need a job at Twitter? He got a
pretty well respected at T-Mobile.
He got a $55 million gold parachute. You can't play around with that.
I'm not saying he's a wackadoo in business. Have you heard him in rooms, people?
I don't know. It's a pretty general statement.
Yeah, I don't know how you can be wackadoo on Clubhouse.
So let me guess, Laura. He's a wackadoo because you disagree with him on things like, let's say, COVID?
Not at all. I absolutely.
So what makes John Legere? What makes John Legere a wackadoo?
Because he comes in calling women bitches and tells people to shut the fuck up. And
that's Grant Cardone. That's not
No,
John
that's
Legere.
John Legere. I've spent many hours with John, and I can tell you, he tells people to shut up. He tells people they're idiots. He can be very, very foul towards people. But I guess that makes a good CEO.
So,
Just leave the room when they attack the hell out of him.
I'll mention that John Legere, incidentally, is praised in a book called The Social CEO as one of the most prominent CEOs or former CEOs to have been able to embrace social media in a way that has really furthered the interest of his company. So I'm not saying that your experience with him hasn't been challenging, but he actually is noted for what he's done. And most people don't know this because they probably didn't read the book, but he's well known among kind of the entrepreneur magazine, Inc. magazine types who are interested in the interface of social media and C-suites.
I think you guys are taking this the wrong way. I have mad respect for John Legere. I just think he can be a wacko sometimes. But I also think Elon Musk can be a wacko sometimes, too.
then you need to provide your resume, because according to the lead mod, you can't make that claim.
But I love it. I have a bad crush on Elon. I guess I'm coming across really wrong, you guys, and I apologize for coming in like a bull and trying to shop. Let's start over. Let me do a redo. I have mad respect for John Legere. I have mad respect for Elon. I have a massive crush on Elon. Men like him are very hard and far and few between. So please, I'm sorry. I came in here like a bull in a china shop. Let me apologize because
it's just that word wackadoo, which is so weird. Is it his mind or his broad shoulders?
The crush on the Elon thing is weird.
I need her resume before she
gets a dad pocket.
Why do I have a crush on him? I have a crush on his brain. I think the man is brilliant. And I find that very attractive. It has nothing to do with his dad bod and his umpteen children. It has to do with the fact that the man is brilliant.
I agree with you, Laura.
Laura, hold on, David. Laura, do you think that Elon is a dipshit?
Absolutely not.
There we go.
What's worse, wackadoo or dipshit?
I would say dipshit.
Wackadoo, diction, urban dipshit.
What's the difference between wackadoo and dipshit?
Put that up.
There's a difference. There's definitely a difference. Look it up.
I think to be fair, she's correct.
From a female perspective, it is very rare to find
dipshit means. Maybe that's what it is.
You don't understand the nuance between wackadoo and dipshit.
Yeah.
Just go on.
The wackadoo is more accurate than dipshit. So yeah.
I thought dipshit just meant an asshole that people didn't like.
A wackadoo is not, you guys are taking it as a negative connotation, and I can see where that would come from.
It's really a compliment, yeah.
It's really a compliment because there are very few and far between men that are wackadoos, that are brilliant, that can run companies, that are CEOs, that can work alongside NASA. So I apologize if you guys think I mean it as a slight. I don't. I mean it as wackadoos are super attractive people. Sorry, that's just me and my weird.
So the Urban Dictionary says it's a step beyond crazy. But it's and Laura, I'm not challenging you here, but it's what you said afterward. You said he's a wackadoo because he goes into rooms and he says things so that were not necessarily things we want to praise. So that's, I think, why people respond.
That's what a person that's a wackadoo does. Will go in and they have no filter.
What I found interesting about him is in the debate, the news world was like Grant Cardone. This is not a criticism of anybody, but like Grant Cardone was making. I mean, that was a marketing funnel for his classes or whatever else. God bless America. God bless capitalism. Legere has more money than God and doesn't have any financial upside, and yet was like as invested in those rooms, which made him more intriguing and more perplexing to me. I couldn't quite figure out that angle.
And my conversations
fucking
with
arguing with
John,
people.
my conversations with John, it's pure entertainment for him. Think about it. I mean, it's pure entertainment for him.
Actually, John goes the other direction. John will actually donate money to people.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that he has given thousands upon thousands to the LGBTQI community. Everybody that needs a hand, not a handout, please. I need to check my words tonight. Anybody that is in despair or needs a hand up, this man is the most generous man in his position that I've ever met on this app.
He got a parachute. I'd be generous.
My favorite exchange I've ever heard on this app was when he and Khaleesi butted heads, and because she had asked him for a job and then called him a racist, and he just tore into her. And she's been horrible on that for like 2 years. We were we were cackling with glee in that moment.
Yeah. There's nothing like when a 60-year-old man rails against a 22-year-old. It just makes you kind of.
I think what's wonderful about this app is that people come in, become interlocutors as peers, and that when people start challenging each other, you don't pull this bullshit. It's like, you have seniority on me. I think you're making another argument beneath you. Go, come on, bro. You're having an off night. I would retire.
She was 23 years old. He was the CEO of T-Mobile or something. Come on.
If we accept what you're saying, then what you're effectively saying is that we shouldn't take anything she says seriously because she's only 23 years old. That argument cuts both ways, which is why the argument you're making is very poor.
But yeah, transition for a second.
What I'm saying.
How much smarter do you think John is than Grant Cardone? I'm guessing like 40 IQ points.
This is a dumb question.
Yeah, so I just want to go back to Miss Laura. So you had originally said that he was a wackadoo, and when they asked, you said because he
women
cusses out people and like calls women bitches or something.
Yeah, that's his level. For me, that's his level of crazy. Like, he has no filter. He has no filter.
But then a few minutes later, you said that wackadoo isn't a negative.
Okay. I think you're mistaking what I'm saying, and I think you're trying to dive deeper than I actually. You're trying to go deeper than I actually meant. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is, he has no filter. He will say anything to anyone, and you have to be some level of wackadoo, and to just be able to go toe to toe with a 22-year-old girl. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I don't get why you're making a 22-year-old girl sound like a giant compared to him.
Yeah,
like it's the other way around. That's why I don't understand why people are making that.
According to Ned, they're interlocutors.
That's the beauty of this app. I understand why the point that you're attempting to make, not as well as you usually make your points, is convenient in this one narrow context. But there's another side to it, which is to suggest that we can't treat each other as conversational equals. And I think the beauty of this app is that we actually can, and that a CEO of a Fortune 50 company can talk to a precocious 23-year-old. And there's not that, well, you don't have the same, professional bona fides that I have. So, again, I don't see that. I think you think that the argument you're making is stronger than it actually is.
Well, I'm not making an argument. I'm standing up for what I think is decency. If the girl was in school and she asked him for a job, she's asking for a job. So I don't think dragging someone who's asking for a job and punching down acquits one well as a man. I apologize.
Well, you're missing a route. You're conveniently omitting a route whereby she called him a racist.
She called him a racist.
Yeah, come on, bro. Are you
racist? He threatened her career and her reputation.
Hold on, Dozy. I wasn't done. So, Khaleesi calls lots of people racist on the app. Lots of people get called racist on the app. I've been called nigger on the app. I've been told people that I've been chipping out on the app. Lots of things happen on the app. I'm just saying, as someone who's not woke, I still believe in some traditional notions of respect, decency, especially for people in positions of power against who asks for a job. I'll give you an example. Earlier today, someone made an anti-Semitic slur. I came off mic while I was speaking and said it was disgusting. Fascinating. Many other people didn't say it was disgusting. But then I was told I should have gone back and said more. So it just seems like certain people have expectations for some and not for others. But when I'm a 66-year-old worth $70 million or whatever, and a 23-year-old asks me for a job and calls me racist, I'm not going to drag her with my online buddies. That's giving bitch made small dick. I'll go ahead and mute up.
Yeah, you can mute up because you should have said more when the guy said that the problem with Kamala Harris is that she married a Jewish man and that she became a princess. Because you were in a conversation with him, and I specifically said to you because I had said how I felt, and I was hoping that if that was said about any other ethnic group or your identity, you'd be jumping all over it. So I was the only one that said to the guy, that's a disgusting comment. And I asked for someone else to chime in and maybe say to the guy, why is that her downfall that she married a Jewish man? Like, no one else would jump in and say anything. So yeah, I did say something to you. And I was furious about it. And I was really hoping somebody else would jump on that asshole.
There was a stage of 30 people.
Right, but you were having dialogue with them.
Excuse me.
And I thanked you for it. I thanked you for it.
I should have said more when people didn't say anything. So I have an expectation to go around when someone says something racist or intimate. That's my job on the app.
No, it's not your job, but you were having dialogue with them.
You know what? I'll also make the sandwiches and bring the lemonade since I
Great idea, Go, but you were having dialogue.
Of course it's a great idea.
That's why I said it.
I get it.
I hope you use Weilers.
That's bullshit. She did not refer to you as the help.
I referred to myself.
What she said is if you're in the middle of a dialogue with somebody and you open your mic and you say something, You should continue the dialogue. That's all she's saying.
I called it out. I was the one that said something.
I was the one who jumped off my mic and said it's disgusting. You're an asshole.
You spoke over him when he was talking to this man. You literally spoke over him.
Disgusting as I was speaking about him. This is insane. So I say something, but I should have said more. But there were 25 other people who didn't say shit. You got nothing to. Of course you think I should say more. Because you have more expectations for the Negro to do your work.
Who was modding in that? Really sick comment.
Way to make it racial, man. That's really.
You weren't here, right? So once you go
off your game
go harass more black
You're so off your game tonight. You're embarrassing
You're
yourself. For the first time in 2 years, you're embarrassing yourself. I've never heard you embarrass yourself.
Go get a
That was a really shitty thing.
How is he the one making it racial? Abby's the one that
She's telling me I have to say more when I was the one who called him out. There were 25
I
other
called
people
him
who
out
said,
immediately
"Oh,
when
this
he
is
said
bullshit."
it. I called him out. I jumped off mic and said he was an asshole.
I know. You and I said something, Abby. No one else said anything. So you're coming at me to say more?
Yeah, I don't really understand that. I don't get why there is more of an expectation.
Because he was in a dialogue with him. Because then he was in a dialogue with him.
When he was having
And honestly, people are going to say shitty things.
How can you say that about Kamala
People should
Harris?
say something, but
As a Jew.
I don't get it. I don't think it's a fair. I don't think it's a fair statement. I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it doesn't sound fair.
It was pretty ugly what the guy said.
I'll listen to someone that was actually in there. I was in that room. I was when it happened. Those of you who were there. Immediately after that guy said, it was a back and forth between the three of us. I swear to God, I heard Goat say the words, "This is fucking disgusting."
He did say that. I heard him say that.
And that's when we jumped in happy. And when you were talking, obviously you went straight to Goat. I would hope you would respond to this. And then, I immediately said myself, I was like, yeah, this guy's fucking horrible. That was what I said. Could I have said anything more? Probably. But why are we making a big deal out of some fucking idiot? He should have been kicked out.
My
Because the comment was disgusting. I mean,
who was the
if we're gonna start policing people around or have this bar where individuals are gonna call out stuff, Clubhouse is gonna be one hell of an interesting place. I mean, that's it. The guy, yeah, you're 100% right. What he said was disgusting, but Gold called it out. I think this is unfair.
Yeah, it's very unfair to just indict Goat when there was a room full of people. You could have stepped into the whole room. Why didn't anybody else say anything? Why is it just one person's job to say something?
He was in a dialogue with him. That's why I said.
But again, you spoke over him as he said that. You literally spoke over him when he said it was disgusting, and then you called him out for not saying anything because you didn't hear him say it.
No, I didn't call him out for not saying anything. I called him out and I said, "Can you please respond? Can you say something more to him?" I was like,
that
was
not fair.
such a blatant statement, what he said. It wasn't just, if you remember what that guy said, he goes on these great accolades about this woman, amazing accolades, and then he says, but the one downside, the one bad thing about her is that she married a Jewish guy and now she becomes a Jewish American princess, and goes off. I mean, it was amazing to me. Yeah, I guess I am upset that I jumped on it. Goat, if you had more to say, then I apologize to you. But I heard you in dialogue with him, so that's why I asked you. If you did come off mic and say it, and I spoke over you, then I apologize.
And you can't expect people to say more when everybody in the room is speaking over everyone. That's what I don't understand about it. Everyone speaks over everyone in this room, and you're expecting him to say more as everyone's speaking over him.
Do you think I got triggered by it? Like, do you understand why I was really upset when I heard it?
Of course, but why are you coming at one person? If you're upset, then come at everybody.
I guess I should have. However, he was in conversation with him, so that's why I said his name. Should I have said everyone on the stage's name? Maybe. But he was in conversation with them, so that's why I said his name.
Abby, the hard thing is you had a mod badge, right? Why not just kick the guy off the fucking stage?
I should have.
Just get it over with.
I really.
It's as simple as that.
You're right. I should have, but I didn't.
That's my fault for not kicking him off the stage, Kelly. I apologize for not kicking him off the stage.
Can you guys hear me?
No, bitch.
Very well. Okay. So, sorry, I didn't catch the beginning of this. Abby, when that happened, so I think it was Norm, somebody back-channeled me and asked me about the comment, and I didn't hear like what initiated it. When I the first thing that I was at the grocery store, the first thing I heard after I started paying attention again was Goat saying something about that's disgusting, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. I looked in the chat, and basically the whole chat was also saying the same thing. And you were a mod. I didn't know exactly what had been said. I'll be honest, like I didn't think, well, granted I didn't hear what was said, but regardless, it seemed like it had been responded to. And then when you wanted him to speak to it more, I wasn't sure why you didn't kick him out of the room or busted into it. I mean, you were a mod. I wasn't really, I don't know, it didn't make sense to me why you didn't take kind of the reins on that, to be honest. But again, the one thing that I did hear as soon as I put my earbud back in my ear was Goat point blank saying like that's disgusting, looking in the chat, and the whole chat was filled with people agreeing. So I do feel like the entire room had a reaction. It wasn't as if there was I don't know, a dismissal of it, but you know, my perspective is limited to the fact that I didn't hear what was said.
So Kelly, I feel like this worked out in that when the truth got out, that it sounds like Goat did what he needed to do, and I heard Abby apologize. What I'm so confused about is Goat. I think he said something about Abby treating him as a Negro, suggesting as if she treated him worse because he's black.
Correct.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I get that very frequently on the app.
I've never heard Abby say or do anything that suggests she would treat somebody worse. That's a really shitty thing and seriously to say.
You should see my back channels. You see my back channels. Many people agree with me. And you weren't here, so you can check.
Yeah, strength in numbers. It's another rhetorical fallacy. What are you doing with the shitty arguments?
Numbers.
You're one of the smartest people on this app. Can you make a good argument for
You're one of the smartest people on this app.
You shouldn't do it.
Hold on,
Agree on that.
let him answer you, because this came up earlier in the room, and I'm not exactly
She's one of the smartest people on this app. Everybody is retarded.
Ad hominem. You got nothing tonight, bro. Nothing. You're embarrassing yourself.
Ed, you did the same thing to both the other person that talked and Goat. Don't play like you haven't been stirring the pot like it's going out of style.
Yeah, he's a bitch. That's what he does.
Listen, so
I don't, Kelly, to answer you, I'm not in the habit of removing people from rooms, and it's Roger's room, so I appreciate the mod badge, but I wouldn't do that in Roger's room. It's really up to him.
no,
That's why I didn't do it.
totally fair enough. But it just, you didn't really. So again, I didn't hear when it was said. So whenever you immediately unmiked, I
I kind of hate every single person in this entire room.
It wasn't until I don't know. It was a second later.
Why is that?
Said anything, and
Have I heard one person that I actually like?
Again,
I mean, I
didn't
like
hear when
Abby,
it was said, so
but
maybe
even
this is just
she's an
the
idiot.
perspective that I had of it. It seemed as though it wasn't an issue that needed to be dealt with. It was understood that it was disgusting. It was commented on. It was agreed upon. It seemed like. So what I'm saying is, I'm not sure what the perspective of the rest of the room was, but I was kind of surprised when it turned out that it hadn't been resolved, is my point. I was surprised that, like a few minutes later, you felt like it hadn't been addressed. That's what I'm saying.
Actually, the comment itself, I mean, I reacted to the Jap comment, but the comment itself, that this negative thing about her is that she married a Jew, and that's the one thing he can't handle about her. What really should have been explored with him, like why he would make that comment in the first place, and what's so negative about her choice in her husband. But I didn't want to discover it. I was so triggered by what the guy said that I wasn't the one that was really going to interrogate him. And the reason I said Goat was not because of the color of Goat's skin, but because Goat was in a conversation with the guy back and forth. So that's why I said that. And I really wish that someone had dug into the guy as to why. I always, when I hear the hatred, no matter who the hatred is addressed to, I like to dig and understand, like, where it's coming from. Especially that one horrible person that keeps showing up in our rooms that now goes under the name Fred. You know, when I hear it, I want to understand why and what's behind it. So that's where I was coming from.
Happy people are different. Listen, when I heard the guy, obviously at that very moment I stopped engaging. Obviously I didn't have the power to like remove him from the room or anything like that. But if you were there, if you were following the conversation, clearly from the very beginning it was shown he's an idiot. First of all, he doesn't even know politics. He was obliterated by the same guy you're talking about. And immediately after, immediately after he made that comment, notice that's when pretty much everyone moved on from him, because like, you don't give them a platform to, you know, say something like that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm all for free speech, but if someone is going to say problematic things, but from now on, how about we hold the same standard for like every single individual? Anyone that comes out and says something, whether it's in the chat or something like that, let's just apply that same standard. At this point, I'm going to tell you this so you can hear it directly from me. If someone says a thing like that, I'm not going to engage them because they're not worth my time. I have better things to do, right? I don't have a problem coming in here arguing with people on a daily basis about political stuff because that's my own form of entertainment. Call me someone who doesn't have a life, that's fine. But I'm not going to engage that individual. And I am not going to call on another person and say, you know what, this is what you have to do with this person. Because if it's not for Clubhouse, chances are I'm never going to meet that person or even have to interact with them ever. That's just what it is. People like that, you can give them a platform. Just ignore the shit out of them. Kick them out if you have the power to do so. Kick them out of the room and we can continue with our conversation. Let's not let some jackass ruin whatever we have here going on. And then we can, you know, continue the argument. Because really, that's what I'm here for. Not to argue with stupid people.
Thank you, Mother.
And yeah, I'll just say this, Abby. Again, the point I'm trying to make, just to reiterate, is that, like from my perspective, it just seemed like what needed to be handled had been handled. I don't know if it seemed that way for anybody else, whatever. But also the idea, and maybe this is just because from your perspective, this is a very different thing. It's it's not something that I understand the way that you do, but it seemed as though. If someone had asked me, like, what's the benefit of interrogating bad ideas in this way when it seemed like there was a pretty sizable consensus about the fact that it was a disgusting comment and he was a dumb fuck, why introducing whatever that information is or whatever he would share into the space, and again, this is my perspective and it's limited to my experiences. I don't know if that always like serves the space in the best way, because why introduce an idea that why introduce the moment to like clean up a bad idea when you're just reintroducing it to a whole ass room that seems to already realize
a whole ass room
and think that it's a problem, because I don't think we're going to change that.
I can't stand everybody in this room.
Like
each comment and thought gets worse and worse and worse. You ever notice that? It's like a death spiral of commentary until the whole thing just gets flushed.
Platform that stuff when it didn't seem like there was any sort of issue to repair other than him.
I hear you, but maybe I'm used to spaces when people like that come into like the Jewish clubhouse or such, and they make comments like that, and we do try to dig deep and try to find out where the hate's coming from and what's the motivator. And so that's my natural tendency, also because I work so much outside of this app in trying to end it and fight it and weeded out. And so that would be my normal reaction, is to just expose it. So I apologize that it was in this room, and should have, I guess, just assumed that he was as ignorant as he sounded, and just let it go. But it's not my inclination.
Also,
No, let me just say this. I don't want to. I just want to make this last point, and then I will be quiet. My point there, Abby, wasn't to say like we shouldn't respond in a different way than we did, or we shouldn't have, or there weren't other ways in which it could have been handled. I mean, but like so many of these things that happen in clubhouse rooms don't happen the same way in real life, and so the opportunity to even have the experience to react that way, depending on your own background, is just going to be limited. But my only point there was to say that, you know, that's how my mind worked. That's how my brain kind of calculated the benefit of addressing it further, or the benefit of addressing anything further, because again, I wasn't quite sure what had even happened. So, you know, it's not to say that, you know, you wanting it addressed further is the wrong thing. That's not at all the point I was making. It's just that I think that the reactions that you're going to get and the way in which people are going to behave are going to be limited to the way that they see the situation happening. And I guess I don't want you to think that it was driven by some sort of dismissal of anything, which I think a lot of these situations do wind up seeming that way.
I got you, Kelly. It's time, place, and manner, and it probably wasn't the room for me to rip him a new one.
And also to bring this up a couple levels of abstraction, and then we have some new people on stage too, so I'll defer to them last, but you know, I feel like there really has not been a consensus that's emerged in terms of like what is the responsibility of, you know, people leading a room to shut off. I mean, obviously somebody's denying the Holocaust, everybody knows, like, all right, you should probably, you know, mute that person. But most of it's much more of a gray area than that. When do you actually step in? What do you have to say? What's your ethical obligation? What's best in terms of, you know, having the most interesting conversation? You know, you think of yourself as an entertainment product in one sense. For example, I'm a cloud chaser. Also, I'm sorry for being white and male. I know that's also a big issue.
He's a cloud chaser.
And
that's the name of the new song. He's a cloud chaser.
Going back several hundred years. All my fault. You know, so the entertainment product, the ethical issue of, all right, like now somebody has introduced ivermectin actually has been the replacement for the
Mr. Chicago
deadly vaccine the whole time. Do you have to step in and say something? Like, in my opinion,
King
yeah, but you can turn into a cunty, Fauci-loving, you know, pro-establishment weirdo pretty quickly too.
Mr.
So
Chicago,
I feel
King
like this
of
is one area
comedy.
where actually we really have made no progress in terms of figuring out what the right answers are.
Well,
but I'm
part
curious
of that
what
is
people
because
want to
of
do.
how
Let me just say one thing. There's so much slack given to white supremacists on this app, you know, and white people saying racist shit on this app. So it's like, I don't know what area you're talking about, but like, let's hold the same energy for what happens in those conversations as well. I don't even have to go into the LGBTQ community, you know, when I'm in these rooms, or even in the Jewish community. When I go into the Jewish rooms as a Jew, do you know what I'm called? I mean, not a Jew, you know, radical, yeah, you're not Jewish, you know, whatever it is. Like, it's insane. I'm just saying, let's hold the same energy.
What?
I'm unclear, but my point holds for all of those things. That, of course, I abhor in the same way that you do, Scotty. So yeah. I'm not quite sure the point you're making.
Well, I'm just saying there's not enough
How are
energy
you even rich?
for the racist part.
How are you so rich?
As well in a lot of these rooms that I go into.
His point was actually coherent. Ned,
I dress like such a weirdo.
I mean, Ned, I know you
Such
agree.
a schmuck.
So, you know, I'm just
you made it seem like
How are you so rich and famous and dressed like such a schmuck?
You know each other well enough that I know that.
No, I know you agree. Yeah, I know you agree with that. I'm just saying, as a white person in these spaces, I pick up on a lot of anti-black racism in these
like
spaces.
such a schmuck.
And I wish other white people would hold the energy to to support black people in these spaces in the same way that I've seen black people support, let's say, Jews when anti-Jewish comments are coming out. That's all I'm saying.
Ned, I appreciate everything you've said, but I'm going to say this. Scotty comes off as empathetic and understanding, and a lot of times you come off as flippant and joking, like you don't take it seriously, and that's it. I mean, that's all.
Flippant's a good word. I accept that criticism.
And I will say that I have seen you, Ned, in the 2+ years on the app that we've been trolling around here. You have stood up and said the right thing.
Thank you for that incredibly underwhelming but so comment, Scotty. Fucking lovable ass.
I enjoy everything you say, Ned, but yeah, that's all. Not but.
We can do better, that's all. Thank you, Ali.
I'll give you an example. I remember running a COVID room, bring these doctors in, and the idea was to be like pro-vaccine without being cunty about it. And we had this guy come up on stage, and he was just like, I don't think COVID exists. And I was curious. I'm like, I had never talked to somebody like that before. Like, this guy literally thought that COVID was completely made up. And I was like, so tell me more. I want to know. Like, what are your favorite podcasts? And there were a couple people on stage that were just like, what the fuck do you think you're doing platforming this piece of shit? Like, do you really think that there's going to be people in the audience being like, he makes some real good points. You know what?
Yeah, probably.
That wasn't going to happen. So, to what extent do you actually, give the mic to people with really dumb, potentially, in theory, harmful points of view?
It's funny that you say that, Ned, because
See, the funny thing is these people don't know they're being recorded. They don't realize how stupid they are. They're sitting here having a dopamine drip feedback loop. They're getting high having this conversation. They don't know that I'm producing this and filming this. And essentially everyone is an idiot. And everyone calls everyone else stupid and an idiot.
But that's just me.
One of the most controversial moments I've encountered on this app was when Greg. I'll blame it on Greg because Greg was very good about taking more of the blame than he should have. But Greg Ellis, who controversial figure in here, but he was always very good to me. He and I ran a couple rooms on anti-Semitism. I'm very proud of those rooms because we, Jews are well aware of anti-Semitism, but we got a lot of goyim in those rooms up to speed on just how much of an issue this is, a growing issue. But, we let Lydia Cotton talk for a few minutes in the beginning of the first room. And people I really trust and respect were fucking pissed about that. Why are you platforming anti-Semite? And, the idea was we had multiple Jewish people on stage. We had a journalist from NBC with Giles on stage. And people were checking everything she was saying, basically line by line. But, again, people were fucking pissed. And I was in a bunch of rooms afterward, talking to people about it. And, there was a huge split. It's like, all right, on one hand, it's like, let's listen to what anti-Semitism sounds like in 2022. And then there were other people that just it was just reckless. There was no reason to give her that much time. Maybe a couple minutes, but you let her talk for, I think we gave her maybe 12 minutes of airtime over 45 minutes, over a 3-hour room. And I still don't know what the right answer is for that. The more I think about it, the less sure I am what the right thing to have done was.
This is El Presidente Roger Mayhem. It doesn't even show you how many followers people have anymore. It's not like it really matters. But...
God damn it, Marshall. Are you telling us matters?
Well, it's about 30 seconds. I'm just going to say
That's what you always say, but it's never 30 seconds because you tell them 4 times.
Start the clock. It actually will be 30 seconds.
This is Marshall.
There was a dude who was a giant racist and used to come onto campus at A&M because they did free speech and they let everybody come. And this guy had a professor named Dr. Meeks listen to what he was saying, and she, word for word, described where it came from, and instead of students being confused, it was a real quick understanding of what it was. That was the story.
Wow, great story, Marshall. Holy shit, Marshall, thanks for that fucking memory, bro. Wow.
Can I ask some follow-up questions? I feel like we didn't get all the detail there, Marshall.
He'll tell the story again in a minute. Marshall, I'll stop giving you shit. But
You can give me shit, Kelly. I don't care. You're fine. I'm too long-winded for my own good, so I appreciate when people tell me.
I'd like to announce that Barbara just found a video that will probably make Nikki Haley never win the general ever.
What's fine?
Just her, you know, calling them announce the session is.
Yeah, I saw this earlier on my way to the gym. I didn't bring it up because we covered Nikki Haley earlier, but Adam, it's not news that she's never going to be president in this country. She's not right now. Maybe there will be a time in the future when Americans might give her a chance. That's not in 2024 or 2028. So, cabinet secretary, or maybe a running mate, possibly. Who's going to make her that running mate? I don't know, because it's not going to be Donald Trump. So, yeah.
Wait, you don't think Trump would pick her as VP?
Nope. Trump is going to go after someone else. That's the thing with Donald Trump. He reminds me of none other than Muammar Gaddafi. Personal loyalty means a lot to him. If you make that decision and say you're going to run against him, he's going to see you as a foe. And yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with him. I come from the Middle East. Loyalty is what it's all about, and that's how Donald Trump ran his camp. Basically, like a Saudi prince.
You should see, by the way, why is it that how come I'm the only one here that's on Truth Social? Y'all should be. That's the place.
I'm on Truth Social.
Okay, Dr.
And
Trump,
I'm a moderate.
do you exchange any messages? Yeah, that's the place to be. I mean, that's where I get all my 3 a.m. scoop about what's fucking. Like, come on.
So,
It's entertaining.
Mama, do
Yeah, you should already know what he's talking about.
I'm no fan of Donald Trump, but I think people need to understand, in terms of evolutionary science, this is all about kin selection, right? Like, this kind of loyalty thing is something that we kind of evolved to conserve, quite frankly. And I'm not saying it's right, but I mean, if you understand it in that context, whether you're talking about the mob or Donald Trump, there's a biological mechanism kind of at play. And it's only since we've become more egalitarian that things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, the survival mechanism is
clearly. Okay. Take a cooking class,
thing has been going on for a long time. Like Hillary Clinton in the campaign after her first defeat of Obama, she targeted senators and Democrat candidates and replaced them with her little strike policy and personally campaigned against them to put in other incumbents. Like loyalty, we had it under Obama, we had it under Bush, we had it under Reagan, Clinton, Bush Sr., Nixon. I mean, so what is it, massacre? I mean, over loyalty, like every president has demanded loyalty throughout history. It's just weird that everybody's hyper-focused on Trump, but forgets all the other things.
The difference between Trump and the difference between Trump and these individuals that you highlighted is sometimes for someone else, they will have no problem actually having.
I don't know if anybody's aware. There's a breaking news story. They're calling it the Valentine's Day Massacre.
And sometimes they even figure out ways to work together.
Americans got boosters today.
Hillary putting in what is it called? No, Hillary being picked for the State Department. Do you know how many people in the Obama administration? Not Obama administration, at the time it wasn't an administration, but during the transition period, the staffers that worked in the Obama camp, how many were opposed to that? Like, so many people, but I don't know, for some reason, he was determined to have her in the State Department, and right now you have someone like a Jeff Flake, who is in the other party, but Biden made him ambassador to Turkey, and it seems like he's doing one hell of a great job right there. A senator from, was it Arizona? Right? People do it. Donald Trump, on the other hand, Brad, I'm talking to you as someone who's lived in places with leaders that operate since
I have lived across
Trump.
the world, Muhammad. Like, I don't need the lecture from you, and
Yeah, okay,
I don't really appreciate
is,
the way that you're trying to, like, sound condescending while you're trying to take the upper hand. Like, I really don't give a fuck. Like, I can look at the facts, I can read the same history books that you have read. So it doesn't matter. I can look back through all politics.
Can I just finish my point while you...
Then land your point without doing the condescension.
I wasn't being condescending or anything like that. All I was trying to say
You also
is...
don't have any condensation either. But go ahead.
Being a troll. But my point being, for Donald Trump, if you compare him to some of these other leaders that I'm talking about, that's it. Like, he takes the meaning of personal loyalty to a different level. And by the way, Truth Social or his Twitter feed is a personal testimony to the argument that I'm making. Like, it's right there where he says things like, listen, this motherfucker should be hung, right? Or I would put a firing squad.
Trump said that he should hang somebody? Where? When? How? Who?
No, he defended
them. He defended them, what they said.
But Brad, why do we have to do this?
I mean, Mohamedou, can you, or anybody else, can you find me the YouTube clip where a president is sitting with the cabinet and they bring the cameras in so that everyone in the cabinet can go around and would swear what seemed like loyalty oaths?
You're talking about the first cabinet?
Praise the president.
Lies.
Yeah, I don't remember George W. Bush doing that, Bill Clinton doing that, Obama, Brandon hasn't done it, Reagan.
Was been.
Does anyone remember any other president doing that?
True kisser.
And they all say how much of a blessing it is from God.
Lies, the forest. Was been. True kisser.
You mean the cabinet meeting where Ben Carson had to lead the prayer?
Maybe somebody could remind me of that one. Also, the Saturday Night Massacre was criminality. I wouldn't use that one as an example. They fire like 3 people to fire Cox. I apologize.
Yeah, I think what matters, Brad, is like the degree to which there is a demand for loyalty versus tolerance for some, dissent for a very competent person to do their job. Like I do agree with you. Everybody demands some loyalty. Think about it like a company. Some CEOs demand a complete and utter loyalty and have very incompetent administrations, and some have more leniency and let people delegate to people to do their thing and achieve better. So Trump went a little too far on demanding.
So can I ask this? So Obama utilizing the Espionage Act to go after journalist sources and jailing them, that wasn't like a kind of weaponization of utilizing loyalty within his cabinet to prevent leaks to the journalists or,
He wasn't targeting people within his cabinet. He was targeting people from outside.
So where do you think those journalists get the sources from?
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I'm not defending Obama's legacy. I'm just saying that Trump took it to another extent. There's a lot of examples.
So I just gave you the point. Obama used the Espionage Act, weaponized it for sources to go after the sources for reporters that were reporting on his administration in a negative perceived light, and then he jailed them. So can you tell me how that is not demanding loyalty or using fear of damage, jail time, to prevent any kind of leaks or any kind of communication that would get out to the public about anything that was going on, like Fast and Furious, things like that.
Brad, can you show us any article, could you put it in the chat of any where Obama utilized the Espionage Act to go after journalists?
Like Peter Stearns reported, James Rosen, those people.
Yeah, I'm aware of what you're talking about.
Those stories were in the press.
So the government went after journalists.
Yeah, they used that on Julian Assange as well. That was actually a precedent-setting one, I think. But that's different than demanding loyalty from within your organization.
No, completely different. The second thing is the issue with Julian Assange. This wasn't even something where it was about the president's agenda. Classified information was being leaked to this guy, and he was publishing it. At that point, did you expect the U.S. government, if it was any other president, George W. Bush, for example, were they just going to sit back on their ass and do nothing about it? But again, we just really...
But again, Mamadou, keep talking. Just talk the whole fucking name, Mamadou.
Who lost their office for not supporting the Clintons? Who were the elected officials from the Clintons? I guess they supported Obama, and then the Clintons got them out of office. Was the claim? I don't.
Brad.
You guys really don't remember that? After her first run-in, after the Obama, and she did it twice, after her Hillary care and went debacle, or, failure, and then after Obama, she was, her campaign was targeting to, go against other incumbents that just didn't side with her. This isn't well known. Do you guys, you guys don't talk about this shit all the time? There's been multiple books written about it. There's just a number of people that even have said, yes. The whole thing with journalists. Do you guys just, you know what? I'm just going to focus on Trump. And not really talk about, the Obama thing. That's,
the journalists, they were trying to crack down on leakers. And a lot of times they were leaking classified information, which is why people went to jail. I'm familiar with that. It has nothing to do with loyalty. But who did the Clintons? I don't even know if that makes sense because she was made Secretary of State. Who are we talking about?
No, she was the commander-in-chief. Come on.
No, but who lost their office in 2012? Because the Clintons...
Hold on, I'll pull it up for you. Give me a couple minutes. Let me Google it so I can pull it up. I don't remember off the top of the head because I don't remember all the names, but she did go back through. There's a number of deep dive into regards to Clinton, and they did the comparison. They talked about her career all the way from Nixon, how she got in trouble with the Nixon issues, all the way through, and then the whole vendetta. There's a host of... Yeah, she was on the Nixon thing. She got discharged from the Democrat. I forget the guy who was running it, but even he said, she was vindictive because she was willing to make up allegations. She was willing to stretch the allegations. And she was dismissed from that. You guys not know this stuff?
Hillary Clinton was involved. Wait, how old is she? This is actually news to me.
You didn't know she was involved in the Nixon thing?
She was a staffer on the trial, or in the House Judiciaries.
I'm sorry. I thought she was an office. I'm sorry. I was getting my timelines mixed up. Okay, so I'll wait for the ribbon.
Yeah, give me a bit.
The thing that always blows my mind is the MAGA desire to normalize Trump and MAGAdom. I was watching an Arizona State Legislature committee hearing on elections, and the amount of distance this man covered to try to act like Stop the Steal was just part of some sort of normal happening that happens after every election. It's just staggering. And there's almost a whole cottage industry around trying to compare outlandish Trump shit to things that aren't congruent in the past to try to somehow normalize it. And it's just the mental gymnastics just leave me in knots. I just can't follow.
I hate it when I agree completely with her.
Yikes. The thing that seemed to change to me under the Trump administration was what the definition of loyalty meant. As I understood it before, and this might be a naive understanding of politics, you still have to carry water for the folks who back you, but there's an expectation that if you get into trouble or shit goes sideways, that bigger figure is going to step onto the platform and go, hey, dude, Michael, but it was my fault. Like, I was the director of it, like nobody else. Trump seemed to flip that on its head and say that people owe loyalty to him, but he owed no loyalty to defend them or treat them in a decent fashion. That, maybe a naive assumption, but that is to me what seems like it changed over his administration, the way he approached the political concept of loyalty.
Yeah, Brad, that was an interesting point you brought up with Donald Trump. Why isn't he the one who's woken? If you consider how many times he called the media fake, and that response in of itself triggered a near race war.
Wait, what?
I said Donald Trump originally is the one who had a campaign approach of calling the media fake, if you recollect, in 2016, and it does connect also with the ongoing social tensions which led to a race war, or the near brink.
When was the near break of a race war?
After George Floyd.
Wait, can you be more specific about location?
Kenosha, Wisconsin, George Floyd.
There was a race war there?
Well, how else did you perceive the violence which nearly burned down that city, or the one in St. Paul during the administration of Donald Trump?
Protests that turned into riots.
How many people died in the war?
I'm just talking about, in theory, what there was of these protests politically.
So the theoretical war.
Yeah, on the record, the government didn't express it that way, just as protest.
Who were the leaders of the different racial factions? Who was the leader of the white faction, the Asian faction?
Yes, a good deal of the backlash for George Floyd was pinned on Black Lives Matter.
Alright, so who were the leaders of the different factions?
Yeah, like were there any military standout?
Throughout the burning of St. Paul and Kenosha, of course, the military had in effect been mobilized.
I was just using military in the same way you were saying war.
Yeah, who won the Battle of St. Paul? What was that, Grant?
Yeah,
and what
was it on the
promotion
hill?
did Kyle Rittenhouse get? Become a major or a colonel?
I suppose you're going skeptical on the terminology, but I won't completely stand out my point that Donald Trump is what had awoken that kind of racial tension in the United States during his term.
You mean he unleashed the white supremacists? Is that what you're saying? Which, by the way, I agree.
You can look at it differently, but it seems to be there, the connection historically.
Oh, I white supremacists, kind of like Walking Dead.
To be fair, though, didn't Hillary do that? And Obama, like the Democrats, isn't it somehow equal? Right.
But who won the race war?
Well, all that's hypothetical over the actual events politically of those racial tensions within his term. Just like I was responding to Brad as to, those certain facts making it look like he was the woken president, not so much Biden. This is the aftermath. When you think of the divisions between white and blacks, it continues to surface. You have Antifa recently protesting and violence happening in Georgia, Atlantic City, because of the killing of a black man from police brutality. So I would estimate that same amount of attention is going to proceed further.
Atlantic City's not Georgia.
Yeah, it's in the bottom of Jersey.
I was slurring Atlantic City off of Georgia.
And even with a really strong slur, it's not really near Georgia.
It has boardwalk, saltwater taffy.
No, it seems to be there, Atlantic City in Georgia.
There is an Atlantic City in Wyoming, by the way.
We have a Paris in Texas.
Wait, Abby, can they make, this is Scotty, can they make Atlantic City any better? Like, can they do something about that?
Oh boy. Can we do a room about it? I have so much to say on that one.
I mean, I'd like to sit in the room and listen, because, I've been there many times over the last, 30 years.
Mom, the doer goats. Which one was asking for the articles on that in the books written by the New York Times guy?
I just want to know the politicians who lost the clicks.
I'd have to go back.
Yeah, and then I can counter argue with Brad on that same point. Wasn't it Ferguson under Obama that at the beginning of this hypothetical racial war? So then Donald Trump seems like the second to wait.
Why start there? Go back to LA, 90 great rights riots. Bush won. Why stop there?
He can't be precise on this topic at all when it comes to what they mean by being woke and those who feel that way politically.
You don't think that people were woke in the 90s?
Yes, sir. At least what that term is supposed to mean, that the system is trying to systematically persecute African Americans through discrimination.
Wasn't the Great Awakening a form of wokeism?
I'm still trying to understand what happened in Atlantic City. If you could clarify that.
Yeah, that was about a month ago. There had been an incident of someone being killed, seemingly unlawful to Antifa, so they protested.
There's a, listen,
with
I
the
don't
red
know
light,
all the details.
or with their speed camera technology, that was a $35 trip or a $50 trip to the gymnasium.
It's called something.
We're going 36 miles an hour. 36 is not very fast.
Not Atlantic, so I think that's why it's confusing other people.
questioning Christianity if it's a real thing or whatever.
There were a bunch of, I guess it was because they were into that. I feel like there was
objective, I don't know, with
proof
people
backing
think
it
are
up, or at
facts.
least I feel like I read that there was, but I could be wrong.
Is
Anyways, they were
and there's a rise
camping
in
out,
witchcraft. And so the one
basically
question
the
I just
equivalent
wanted
of
to
chains
ask
themselves to
is where
trees, trying to prevent.
act like people were getting hunted down by the masses or something, like there's a bunch of witch hunters running around burning bitches.
The claim is that one of these people fired a weapon at one of the officers who then fired back. And there was an officer actually.
Reporting you, go fucking report me.
I think one.
What the fuck you think?
Park Real Estate Agency, thanks.
All those liberals and Democrats, please stop championing yourselves to the trees. Friends can fight back. Some pine trees that you think or some trees could actually cause problems for you, such as breathing, skin, toxicity, things around there. And there's critters that live there that will think you're attacking their home. Just letting you know, it could be a painful experience for you and a very expensive hospital trip if you think that chaining yourself to a tree is going to be the way to.
Eco-terrorism is better thought out by computer hackers.
Okay, I'll stop. You got me.
What about the weathermen? Were they interact?
With the weathermen, like the
No, the group weathermen.
You mean Weather
Okay.
Underground?
No, the ones that wanted to blow up the,
Whether
Yeah, Weatherman is a band from Brooklyn.
and the Weather Report is a jazz fusion. But the so you're talking about the weathermen or Weather Underground?
the ones that wanted to blow up under the Capitol, the where the little train
In
is.
the early 70s, something like that.
In the 70s, yeah, early 70s.
Yeah, they had they blew up a townhouse in Greenwich Village over here because they didn't know how to make a fucking bomb correctly, and it blew up in the basement. The whole brownstone collapsed, and it killed 5 people.
Yeah, now it's the only ugly brownstone in the entire block.
Exactly. You noticed that, huh?
I do need to answer the question on Atlantic City. Just know that since the time of Boardwalk Empire, how many mayors have gone to jail. So you can Google and read about all the different mayors that have done time.
What's the over-under?
Oh, God. Just the time I lived there, there was two of them. And then after I left, another 2. And then prior. So, no, a lot of them go. But there's a number of things wrong with it. As I said, we could do a whole room. We could talk about how poorly it was.
It wasn't pleasant when I was there a few months ago. Not because I lost, just in general.
Well, someone got the brilliant idea when they passed the legislation in 1977 that the employees should park along the highway. So basically, they just disincentivized any foot traffic within the city because you had 3,000 employees at each, like 2,000, 3,000 at each one of the different resort projects, or along the boardwalk and along the beach. But the staff coming in just went from a shuttle bus on the highway into the property, so it never developed, if it makes sense what I'm saying, any shops or stores. There was just no foot traffic, and for any tourists coming in, they just go straight to the parking garage and into the property. So they weren't walking around the city, and it was a real problem. It was only until recently that they did a lot of condemnation and tried to build some new commercial around the city. But it's still a pit.
Hey, I just wanted to address something in the chat to the people in the chat that are going through like, oh no, I'm an idiot. There's a tree in Florida called the Mackinac tree. It kind of extends through up into Georgia. There's parts of it there. The sap on it exudes a sap-like substance that can cause blistering, burning, asthma attacks. It can trigger a respiratory shutdown and response. Like I said, you guys can keep chaining yourselves to trees. I'm just said, be careful which trees you put around. As somebody who spends time in nature and not just wandering the redwood forest, saying there are trees and plants in various areas around this country that will fucking kill you. I was giving a PSA. But you know what? You do you. Go wrap yourself around. You hug it through the night. You have fun. And then you die. And then you can go crying and say, hey, you know, I could have learned something on Clubhouse today and I didn't.
I don't disagree, but where did this come from?
It's because I was trying to say that, and somebody in the chat, thank you, it's called Cop City. I was trying to just point out that what these protesters were doing was trying to prevent development, and I said it was akin to protesters chaining themselves to trees. They weren't literally doing that, but it wasn't. There wasn't like. It doesn't sound like it was some sort of an ambush situation. It was like a preventative. Sorry, words are not working right now. It was a protest, and they didn't want the development to happen. And so I apologize for using that reference. It seems like it has now started some.
But that kid was killed, though, right? Just to be clear, by the cops.
He was shot. An officer was shot. As I said, I haven't read a whole lot about I don't. Yeah, I haven't read a whole.
No, we'll get rid of the tree reference. Like, it's done. It's tabled.
Yeah, no, but what my point was, I didn't want to insinuate that these protesters were there as like there were claims that they were there to like ambush officers, but it doesn't seem like that's what they were there for. They were there to prevent development of the property.
Yeah, they were just a bunch of hippies, and one of them got killed by the cops, because that's what cops tend to do.
So just to maintain, or maybe even make a bit of a segue for a moment, this whole notion of people stealing animals from zoos has kind of fascinated me. These animal rights activists stealing animals and then not being prepared to take care of them. I don't know if that's a conversation to be had here, but it fascinates me nonetheless.
I think it's interesting. I don't think a lot of those animals deserve to be kept in cages like that. They're wild. They're meant to be wild. They're not meant in a lot to be in places like that.
Marshall, you know most of them are bred from captivity. Like, you can't just set these things free to the wild. You couldn't even release them after. You would have to put them in a backyard preserve. They still would have difficulty. Like, these aren't your people going out and grabbing them.
No, that is actually true, Brad. You can't just throw them out and expect them. They don't know how to do this kind of stuff. There is a lone exception, which is the great owl that escaped from, I think, the Bronx Zoo, is now hanging out in Central Park, living his best life. So, but he's in LA.
So kind of a related story. The first animal that ever escaped on me in a zoological park was a barn owl, and we just let him. They're ubiquitous basically, so we just let him have his freedom. He was born in captivity, and hopefully he survived. And it was definitely my mistake. But I do remember years ago, and I'll land really quick. I was at the New England Aquarium in a wetsuit, carrying a bucket of fish. And this guy comes and accosts me and wants to release the sea lions. And the New England Aquarium's headquarters aren't on the campus of the aquarium. They're a couple blocks away in Boston. And anyways, even back in the 80s, people were crazy. I mean, what do you do with an animal? Like, what are you going to release a California sea lion into the Atlantic? It's just absolutely absurd. But there is really, truly an attack on zoos now, which I think is, crazy. As Brad said, the animals are born in captivity, and you can't release the people that are taking them aren't prepared to put them in the housing that they need, in the conditions that they need, whether it's, a lot of those enclosures have life support systems, all kinds of things. So anyways, fascinating.
Well, we had that incident happen right up here. We have a small park that's catered to the genetic restoration of bison, the American bison. As you know, most of the bison were mixed with cattle, and so researchers and a whole bunch of people have been trying to, reintroduce a stronger strand to restore the bison to its natural thing, to kind of weed out that bovine genetic stuff. So these idiots thought it was smart to go through an area that they had this massive area, and they were going to herd these bison up on 4-wheelers and think they were going to get away with it, and they didn't make it out so well. Like, they lost all their equipment, it was damaged. I mean, it was just like one of those funny stories that you just like, all right, you guys are idiots.
Yeah, just to be clear, separate them from like the left writ large. These are just like fringe left people generally doing this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, Scotty, I'm not saying that animal welfare, like, I'm not saying that some animal rights groups don't have great intentions. But there's certainly, there are fringe groups of people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing. And
yeah, of course.
They're putting themselves and other people at risk. And that's a great point, Brad. Like brucellosis and bovine tuberculosis, people's, the amount of damage that could be done if one person brings infected cattle onto bison range, if you will. I mean, it's just catastrophic. And, it would absolutely be so disruptive. And then you'd have to call all these bison in addition to the cat. I mean, it just, these are the dangers of people with misplaced compassion who don't really know what they're doing.
You sound like the last season of Yellowstone, by the way.
Did they talk about that?
Yeah, it's the whole
It's a great. No spoiler.
It was the whole. It was specifically about that.
I wish we would have an administration that actually talked about that, because, like, in Florida, there's a huge Burmese python and other snakes. They're becoming an epidemic by being released in the wild. I think, what is it, in Georgia, in New Orleans, they have the neutrino. This is a giant rat. They pay people to go out and hunt them. So you have these critters that people are getting, and they're just releasing, or they're quote rescuing them and then just releasing them in the wild. And they don't understand how damaging that is as an impact. Like, I don't applaud your good intentions, because you literally are a moron to introduce a new species into an area with that they're going to be prolific, they're going to have no competition, and they're going to be able to dominate the area. It's just, I don't know where people's heads are at. Like, we already experienced this with the mongooses in the Caribbean and in Hawaii, and they were killing off all the native birds. Like, we've done stupid shit like this in the past that, like, people just don't bother to really look back and look at.
Yeah, and you have to appreciate that in these, game biologists are interested.
Okay, that's it, everybody. It's my 2-hour evening podcast. God bless. This is
to sustain the national parks,
Podcast.com.
still need these